Ladies and gentlemen, we bring you the following message from WJEN. The only place this message can be brought to you by. Discussing histories, mysteries, and movies. That's right. History, mysteries, and movies. But we know that true patrons have brought us this.
We've only scratched the surface of it. I mean, there's so much out there to learn. People are learning new stuff all the time about it.
So much Jeff and Ron.
It combines both our names.
Dad, can I call you Ron?
Yeah.
Welcome to the first episode of So Much Jeff and Ron, brought to you by So Much JENergy Patreon. So Much Jeff and Ron. Dad, can I call you Ron? We've known each other long enough. You think I can call you that?
Yeah.
All right. What do you think of the name? So Much Jeff and Ron. So Much Jeff and Ron.
I think it goes pretty good. It combines both our names.
Yep. So Much Jeff and Ron. Brought to you by So Much JENergy, Dad. Today we're going to be talking about things, history, mysteries, and movies. Small, light discussions about history, mysteries, and movies. Any of those you're excited to talk about? Probably the movie.
Yeah.
But first, Dad, let's start with history. Today we're going to discuss things history. Dad, when I talked to you about the history or history events or the history of an object, what did you suggest?
History of horseshoes.
The horseshoes, as in horseshoe tossing, the game?
Yes.
All right, Dad. So I had looked up the history, got a little bit of facts and history about the horseshoe pitching, horseshoe tossing. You play a lot of horseshoes, Dad?
Yeah, I used to. I don't anymore. Where I move now, there ain't really no setup for them. When I was younger and I lived at home, I always pitched because you can pitch horseshoes when you're old or young. It's like fishing or bowling.
Right. Was that the 60s? 60s?
Yes.
Yep.
And 70s.
60s and 70s. Nice. Horseshoe pitching can date back to actually the Olympian Games from what I had found. It goes back to the discus event of the Olympian Games. And what they would do is they would chuck the discus. You familiar with the discus?
Yes.
It's about 10, 12 inches, usually a stone or a metal plate. So what they would do in the camps back then, the peasants and whatnot in the village started making their own rings. They were 8-inch round rings called quoits. It was an 8-inch round ring and it was a quoit, and they would throw it at a stake that was about 2 inches above the ground. And that became a game of quoits. Now that's back in the Olympian times. The stake grew over the years and got to eventually 4 inches. Then they made it 6 inches, and eventually around early 1900s, it became what we now known as the 14 inches above the ground.
Yeah, and probably like maybe a 1.5 inch pipe.
Yeah, it's a 1-inch round stake, and it's about 14 inches, but they did it's at 19 yards. The stakes were apart, center to center, 19 yards.
Yeah, that's legal. Yeah.
Yep. Is that about 40 feet? It's pretty close to 40 feet.
Yeah, that's remember, when you throw in like a league, that's what they usually have. And they also got the pits. They're like 2 foot by 4 foot, and they're lined in 4x4s with sand in the middle.
Yep, and there's a lot of history about the horseshoes that goes back to the Revolutionary War. They would play it in the camps there. It was actually said that by the England's Duke of Wellington that the war was won by pitchers of horseshoe hardware because all the soldiers in the camps played it. Then eventually when they went back home and they brought that game back home with them, and the same thing had happened over a number of wars, all the way World War I, same thing that made another big boom, brought it back, and that's what really made it take off here in the U.S. The soldiers bringing it back from overseas and really sprouting it out here in the country. And eventually horseshoe leagues, tournaments, and then eventually there became early 1911, 1912 or so, it became the first horseshoe association decided to regulate it, come up with tournaments and come up with rules and regulations for it. And that started, and that pretty much just moved it into a professional, making it a sport or a great pastime, because now they actually had established rules, directions, how to play. So everybody across the country is playing the exact same way, but it all stemmed from a game of quoits.
All right. How did it come about where they got the object of the horseshoe itself?
Well, it started with the metal ring, the quoit, the 8-inch round ring. And then eventually they found that over time they could use old horseshoes that came off of horses, that they were no longer usable on the horses themselves. And they realized with that, you could, with the open end and it shaped like a U like that they could toss it in a way that it would occasionally land on it, or you could even land short of it and still slide it on. Whereas opposed to quoits, you had to get out straight over top. It was a full ring. Now it brought on a game of skill and a game of whether or not you could ring it, lean it. And again, even with that, when they started out in the early 1900s, a ringer was worth 5 points. Leaner was 3. Regular within distance was 1 point. And the distance was 8 inches. That's what the width of the horseshoe was. And I believe it still is to this day, 8 inches.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, but that's where the opening in the horseshoe came from. So that's about what I could find. That's the history of horseshoes. Now, along with that, I also started looking up the history of cornhole. Dad, you familiar with cornhole?
Yes, I am.
Or do you still currently making cornhole boards, Dad?
Yeah, I like it. It's real fun. It gives me something to do while I'm sitting around the house. You may tell them.
You talk about whatever you want.
All right, and the boards itself, they're 2 foot wide, 4 foot long, and with a 6-inch hole. And then your bean bags are 6 by 6, and they come in all different colors, and they weigh like maybe half a pound. And you put them at I don't know, about 27 feet. That's regulation.
Yep. I'd looked up the history of cornhole to see kind of, because I assume that kind of came from the same history or gist as horseshoes. So leading into that, I started finding up things about cornhole. Found different names for cornhole. People call it cornhole, bag toss, beanbag toss, bags, beanbag game, bags game, tailgate toss, soft horseshoes, chucko, doghouse, hillbilly toss. It really depends on where you're at in the country, but the gist of it is cornhole, beanbags. Like a lot of that dates back to like they had a game called parlor quoits, which actually came from quoits, which was a different type of game than the one we just talked about with horseshoes. In this game of quoits, what they used to do was dig a hole and they threw stones into a hole in the ground. Then eventually, gentleman decided to save the soldiers trouble and save kids trouble of digging holes in the ground. And he took a cabinet, flipped it upside down, and then found out that the kids were getting injured with the stones that they were tossing. So he ended up making them little bags filled with sand, and they would throw little sandbags into cabinets. That dated back to 1300s, 1386. The gentleman was doing that. Now, if you fast forward to about 1883, first patent for a game called parlor quoits was made, and it was in 1883 by Heigler de Wint. He applied for a patent called parlor quoits with this game, which was the earliest version of a cornhole board. There was a square hole instead of a round hole in the board. And the game was first to be recorded where bags of corn were actually thrown onto the wooden board with a square hole in it. Yep, that was parlor quoits. Now then the sport became over in Chicago. They started calling it bags and bago. In the early 60s, it really sprung out in southern Ohio in the 60s, and that's what took it from there, Cincinnati, up through Ohio, up north, and then a little bit south of there, and it really just took off across the country as a favorite pastime of people just making boards, putting a hole in them, chucking bags of corn at it, bags of sand, anything of that nature, and that just became a tailgate type of backyard party game.
Yeah, now they got the World Leagues on TV. You can win thousands of dollars. Just you can be the cornhole champion of the world. They got different prize money, and you can go to a certain one place and practice. And then you can go into a tournament where you can be like, they do elimination bouts where you got to compete for a position like the top 10, and then they go a league where you can try to get the top 4, then the top 2, and then they give you a plaque and like that, prize money and a plaque. It's come a long way since they first started.
Right. Yep. I like that it's taken off though, and it's become a backyard game. You and I grew up, or at least I've grown up, I'm sure you two, playing horseshoes and whatnot. We grew up actually playing a lot of backyard games. We play a lot of backyard games, I think. Yeah,
you got croquet, and we got volleyball, you got lawn bocce and ladder ball. And as the new games come out, we usually try to try them much as we can, to see how, just pick
gives you something to do on a cookout, at least when you're cooking out. I mean, we used to throw the frisbee.
Yeah, a little bit of croquet. And
what I actually heard this year is that they're going to stop making croquet sets because they're just not selling anymore, because people aren't playing croquet anymore. They're going to stop selling croquet sets.
They're kind of dangerous around kids. People swinging the mallet itself.
Yeah, but you're not supposed to be hitting the ball that hard. Look at how we play. We drive each other. How far would you say when you drive somebody in croquet, their ball goes?
I'm talking about when you swing the mallet back, and if somebody's back there, you can hit them.
Yeah, but look people have been playing games like similar to croquet. Polo, look at polo.
Yeah, I know.
Look at horse polo.
Yeah.
You think, I think people were getting injured back then playing those games, especially.
Yeah. or what's that one where you go with the stick with the horse? They got the long.
Is it polo? Are you thinking polo?
No, it's the real long stick, and they jab you and knock you off the horse.
Joust?
Yeah.
Oh, jousting?
Yeah, back then people used to die on that game. Getting stabbed with it and all that. But I don't think I'd recommend that.
Jousting? No, probably for the same reason they outlawed jarts. People getting poked and jabbed with them and whatnot.
That was during when the knights were playing, with the horses, and you try to knock each other off the horse, but sometimes it wouldn't work that way.
Anything else about the history of horseshoes, cornhole? Anything else you want to talk about cornhole history?
I think we covered
cornhole.
I think we covered the basics.
All right. Again, these are just light discussions and things and whatnot. Just you and I talking, basically discussing what we know and a little bit of knowledge that we have or can find about things. But we encourage people to look up more if interested in any of the topics. For the mystery of this episode, we're going to talk about the Mothman. We've just gone to West Virginia this past summer.
That sounds good.
Talk about Mothman. What do you think about Mothman? Do you believe in the Mothman? After visiting West Virginia, learning more about the Mothman than what you had known previous, do you believe in the Mothman?
Well, it's like hundreds of people say they've seen it, but nobody's really they really ain't got the proof like you need to put it inside, so the scientists can, examine it. And people, I don't know if they even got pictures of it. I'm talking about official pictures.
Right.
People said they seen it on the side of the road with the red eyes, but until somebody has come along with, real proof, I don't know if it exists or not. It's just like Bigfoot. If all these people see Bigfoot, but nobody's really actually shot one or even took a picture so they can bring it in and examine it. And somebody has got to, it's been around 1,000 years or something, and somebody has got to go into the woods and because I know people carry guns all the time.
Right.
And cameras.
Right.
And they got these trail cams, but nobody has actually come forward and actually shot one and then put it in the back of a truck and took it to some lab and examined it. And nobody has done that.
No physical proof besides a few footprints, maybe some hair.
Yeah. And they got people with footprints with long boards, and they go along and put them in the dirt, and they take plaster footprints of them. But
the thing with the Mothman, though, the proof is that there has been hundreds. There was over 100 people at the Silver Lake Bridge that had seen it, like 100 people in one area that had seen what they believe is the Mothman. These are people that are still alive today that still today claim to have seen the Mothman. That was in 1966, 1967.
Yeah, that's when all the sightings were about.
Right. Here's what I could find a little bit on. If I looked it up on Wikipedia, Dad, Mothman, it says, in West Virginia folklore, the Mothman is a humanoid creature reportedly seen in the Point Pleasant, West Virginia area, November 15th, 1966 to December 15th, 1967. The first newspaper report was published in the Point Pleasant Register dated November 16th, 1966, titled, Couple See Man-Sized Bird, Creature, Something. The national press soon picked up on the reports and helped spread the story across the United States. The Mothman was introduced to a wider audience by Gray Barker in 1970 and was later popularized by John Keel in his 1975 book, The Mothman Prophecies, claiming that there was a supernatural events related to the sightings and a connection to the collapse of the Silver Bridge. The book was later adapted into the film with starring Richard Gere. Dad, have you seen that film?
Yes, I have.
What'd you think of that?
You got to really take it all. He covered a lot of stuff, and you almost got to take it with a grain of salt. You know what I mean?
The thing with John Keel, and that's who wrote the Mothman Prophecy book, is he attributed a lot of that to aliens, a lot of it to the Men in Black. He was actually on the other side of West Virginia at the time, investigating aliens and alien sightings on the other side of West Virginia when the Mothman sightings first started occurring. The first incident came on record that showed up again was in 1966. Two young couples from the Point Pleasant area, Roger and Linda Scarberry, Steve and Mary Marlette, told police they saw a large gray creature whose eyes glowed red when the car's headlights picked them up. They described it as a large flying man with 10-foot wings following their car while they were driving in and around the area known as the TNT area. It's the site of the former World War II munitions plant. Dad remembers going to that? We saw that when we were there.
Yeah, it's a big building, and that he would fly and sit on top of it and look down at people, and then people would see him actually take off, like launch himself off the top of it, and then he would people would see like a dark shadow, and then on the ground, and all of a sudden he'd be right up on top of the building, like he just jumped from there all the way to the top.
Right. In the munitions plants, there was over 100 of these mounds that were giant cement domes. They were probably 25 feet across.
Yeah, they're called bunkers.
Yeah, bunkers, 20 feet tall. These domes. There's over 100 of them out there. And again, in the early 60s and mid 60s, that's where people would go to hang out. There was a Lover's Lane place there. A lot of people from town would just go there. Now, at the time, I think there was 4,000 people in this town.
Yeah,
somewhere around there in Point Pleasant there. And a lot of people had reported seeing and having encounters with this large bird-like creature. And that's what brought John Keel's attention from across the state over. So he started talking to these people and investigating them. And he found that there was a news reporter, Mary Heyer. You remember hearing about Mary Heyer at the museum when we went there? She was the news reporter that pretty much had her choice and pick of the Mothman stories. Everybody came to her. They'd go to the police and then they'd go right to her. And so John Keel teamed up with her, and nobody in town that had events or incidents with the Mothman after that point would deal with any other reporter. I know there was a story I'd read about a lot of reporters coming to town, trying to talk to these people and interview them for their papers about it. And the only people that they would talk to was Mary Heyer. And they said it was said because she actually believed that what these people were seeing was real, and she didn't discredit them or write them off as loony or weirdos or anything like that. And that kind of got the word of the Mothman out there, and where people started coming forth with all their stories and incidents and events that they happened to them pertaining to the Mothman.
Yeah, but you talk to over 100 and something people. Somebody's got to have seen something, because everybody ain't going to come up with the same story without all of them relating to the same thing they witnessed.
Right. It basically culminated that on December 15th, 1967, do you remember hearing about the collapse of the Silver Bridge?
Yes.
46 people died. There was over 100 people that had seen the Mothman just prior to that.
And the whole bridge was full of cars, and they didn't have time to go anywhere.
It was at rush hour.
Yeah.
And it gave rise to the legend and connected to the Mothman sightings to the bridge. John Keel had attributed a lot of his findings to be that he's on the path to something real, because there was men in black that were showing up and causing
a conspiracy.
Yeah, he believed heavily in the men in black, and that the men in black were invading into what was actually happening and trying to change people's opinions and turn things around. So that's what brought a lot of attention to John Keel. But it's hard to say, but where do you think the Mothman got his name Mothman from?
Because some people thinks he looks like a big bat. The Mothman he said he's got like a head like a moth, and he's got wings like a moth, but he's got his ears stick up like pointed, and his head's almost like a bat, but in a way it's like a moth too. Right.
This the description of him. He also was real similar sounding to in the Batman comics. There was a villain known as Mothman, and the description everybody was kind of giving looked a lot like what was in the comics, except this was in real life. The thing with these people is that these are just everyday people that claim to have seen it. These are people that are still alive. Like even when we were there in West Virginia visiting and stuff, a lot of these people still live there and still 100% claim that what they had seen is what had happened.
A lot of people ain't going to go on record and get a chance of being ridiculed and on what they seen. So somebody has got to have seen something.
Right. It just sucks because, we can sit here and discuss it for, 5-10 minutes each, but there's so much information out there about the Mothman, and you could go down any road of it. There was alien incidents and sightings and occurrences happening at the time. There were men in black sightings and occurrences happening at the time. All of this leading up to Mothman's sightings for that year and a half, and a lot of it, basically people, chalked him up as a harbinger of doom, because wherever he was spotted, there generally seemed to be bad luck and bad juju following it. I know a lot of the people there was a few people that had claimed that when they had seen the Mothman and they were fleeing from the Mothman, they wrecked their car. A few people had perished in car accidents that way. And again, it culminated with the the sighting of him by over 100 people on the Silver Bridge. And then again, the bridge collapsed that night, killing 46 people 10 days before Christmas, 1967.
And another cryptoid back then was the chupacabra, and it took like a little bit of slack off the Mothman, but people were leaning towards the Mothman more than the other one. Now, there was other cryptoids back then too.
Even in West Virginia, there was a cryptoid. There was the Flatwoods Monster. I'm not that familiar with the Flatwoods Monster, and that's something else we could eventually get into. But that was also being sighted just after the Mothman kind of stopped being seen for a while. The Flatwoods Monster showed up, which is a totally different looking creature. This was almost half alien looking, half monster looking creature called the Flatwoods Monster.
And another one was called the Grassman. He was, I think he was found in Ohio. I'm not sure what state, but he was like a form of Bigfoot. They called him the Grassman.
Was he green? Like, did he look like Bigfoot covered in moss?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
I'm not familiar with the Grassman. That sounds fun.
Yeah, we'd have to get some more information on that.
Anything else you want to add about the Mothman, Dad, in closing before we wrap up the Mothman segment here?
No, just like the cornhole and horseshoe, I think we covered we've only scratched the surface of it. I mean, there's so much out there to learn, that people are learning new stuff all the time about it. And then it's going to take time, to actually make proof down to the science of it, to find out the real story.
Right. All right. Yep. But again, if you're interested in the Mothman or cryptids of anything, and again, we'll be discussing different type of mysteries. Some of it will be Mothman related. Again, I think we should get back into Mothman again. Some of it probably be Bigfoot related, Loch Ness, aliens, parallel dimensions, Roswell, Area 51, anything mystery. That's what we're here just to discuss. So much Jeff and Ron, everything history, mysteries, movies, short, light discussions. Moving on, Dad, we talked about doing a short discussion on a movie. Any kind of recent movie you had seen recently, and what movie did you suggest there, Dad?
We got together and we decided on Rocky IV.
Rocky IV, Dad. We actually started a Rocky-thon where we watched Rocky 1 through 6, Rocky Balboa, and we watched all 6 just so that we could watch 4 and get the full effect of 4 with the movies coming prior to it and after it. I believe we got the full effect of Rocky IV, which I believe is the climax of the Rocky franchise. I believe Rocky 1 is good. Rocky 2 was even better. Rocky 3 is great. Rocky 4 is epic. I think Rocky 5, it really went downhill. Rocky 6, again, it started coming back up again. It was great, but not Rocky 4. I think Rocky 4 is the pinnacle of the Rocky franchise, Dad. Would you agree to that?
Yeah, it went into more detail. Drago, he was, I don't know, in a gym that was more, what do you call?
He was more lab. I think he was more of he was a more soldier. He's more militant.
Yeah.
He was the Russian. I think they actually modeled him after the Spetsnaz program over in Russia, which was just creating the ultimate soldier, the perfect soldier. And they decided to throw their hat into the boxing world. And so they turned one of their soldiers into an athlete. And I believe the Spetsnaz even had to be like a trained athlete. Russia decides to enter the boxing world, and they start calling out Rocky Balboa, get him out of, put the title up and fight this guy. And who steps up? Creed, Apollo Creed. That's who Rocky fights in Rocky 1, Rocky 2, Rocky 3, they become friends. Creed trains him, in Rocky 3, Mickey passes. Creed steps in, becomes Rocky's trainer, trains him against Clubber Lang. Then in Rocky 4, Creed comes out of retirement, accepts an exhibition match against Ivan Drago, Dolph Lundgren, who's like created as the perfect ultimate killing machine, the ultimate boxer.
They actually called him a robot because he was perfect in every way. And his punch power, they said, for a regular boxer is 1850, and he was up to 2,100 pounds per square inch
of just punching awesomeness.
Yeah.
When he was fighting Apollo Creed steps in and fights Ivan Drago as an exhibition match. And during that exhibition match, Ivan Drago beats Creed into a pulp. And Creed knows this. And Rocky wants to throw in the towel, and Creed says he can't stop. Don't stop the match no matter what. No matter what. Creed steps back in the ring, A few more blows to the head later, he's done. He perishes. Ivan Drago kills him in the ring. Rocky decides he wants to step in. He's going to challenge him to a match, but he can't get this sanctioned by the Boxing Association, so they take his belt away. They strip Rocky of his belt. And just as a civilian, Rocky goes and agrees to a match against Ivan Drago over in Russia on his stomping grounds.
He was just out of this world. When Rocky was training, he did everything, like back, well, the roots of training, like running in snow and, carrying logs on his back, cutting wood, lifting boulders, just, running up and down cliffs that were full of snow. I mean, he just went all out. He wasn't in these high-tech gyms, where everything was air conditioning and it was real nice gym and stuff. And he was out in the middle of Russia. Yeah, go ahead.
And like you had said, he trains and he's doing it the old-fashioned way. Everything Rocky's doing is out in a cold barn, and he's lifting rocks, and they click over, and Ivan Drago's lifting crazy weights with machines, and they got everything hooked to him, and they're monitoring every ounce of everything Ivan Drago is doing. And then you click over, Rocky's running up a mountain, and then you click back over, Ivan Drago's running on a treadmill, and the treadmill's at a 45, then a 50-degree angle, then 60, and then you click over, and Rocky's running up the side of a mountain. Everything Rocky is doing is it's more Neanderthal. It's more raw.
And they got Drago running a track, and they're timing him, and then they switch over to Rocky, like Jeff said, when he's running around up and down snow, and then they switch back and show him in a gym.
Right, and then eventually it culminates, and again, Adrian, who wasn't supportive in the beginning, and then she steps back in, and she shows up in Russia and gives up Rocky that extra oomph he needs, which he's always needing from Adrian. It's the whole reason she's in these movies, is that she's his other half, his yin to his yang. And once she throws in her hat and supports him, that's when it jumps up a notch and you get a montage. The great thing here, Dad, now I just want to point this out about Rocky IV. To me, my favorite part of Rocky IV are the montages. There are so many montages throughout the Rocky series, but they culminate with just the greatest blend of movie and montage in Rocky IV.
Yeah, because they keep reflecting back to 1 and 2 of the montage, and they bring it in just at the right time.
I started looking up Rocky IV montages because I knew we were going to be talking Rocky IV today, and I just wanted to be, again, familiar and that psyched about it. So I looked up the montages, and I found in that movie that there is 39.1% of that movie, Rocky IV, is montages. 50% of the whole second half is montages.
And he only actually fought in the picture for like 10 minutes.
There's the scene where he's montaging, he's training, and he's doing everything he can. What we just discussed, he's running up the mountains and he's lifting rocks and he's doing everything he can. And then he shows up, and then Adrian shows up and she supports him. And there's about 15 seconds of dialogue where he says, no matter what, she's there to support him, no matter what. He repeats, no matter what, no matter what. And then boom, it goes right into another montage. And that montage amps it up even more with now Adrian's there and she's there watching him train, and he's training his ass off. And then finally it culminates to right when that montage ends, final battle, Ivan Drago versus Rocky. And I read that even in that final scene, Dad, where they're fighting and they're blow to blow and they're throwing fists, and Rocky is punching his way through the Cold War for the American people, Dad. I believe Rocky was fighting for everyone in this country at that time, because the Cold War was happening. And Rocky single-handedly punched us out of that Cold War, Dad. You agree with that?
Yeah, because he said if the United States and Russia, if them two can get along, and then he says, I'm sure everyone can get along between Russia and the United States, because he said if they can do it, we all can do it.
If them two men in the ring going blow to blow and throwing everything they have at each other, and they can still come to a mutual understanding, and they can still get along, that anybody in this planet can still get along, and single-handedly turned Russia into fans of America, Dad. They started chanting Rocky's name.
Yeah.
At that point. And
because when he first come out, everybody like booed him, and they weren't throwing stuff at him, but you can tell nobody wanted him there. You know that his whole speech he gives at the end? You know the Rocky speech that he gives there at the end? Yeah. That whole thing was improvised.
by Sylvester Stallone at that moment in that stadium.
Oh, he did it off the top of his head?
Yep, the whole thing was improvised. He just said he knew he wanted to do some kind of great closing speech, and that's when he came up with the speech.
Oh, so that wasn't in the dialogue.
In the script? Nope.
No.
Actually, Sylvester Stallone wrote every Rocky movie, 1 through 6. Every one of them was written by Stallone and directed by Stallone, except Rocky 1 and Rocky 5 are both directed by a different gentleman, but all of them were written by Sylvester Stallone. Rocky 4 especially, written and directed by Stallone. The actual movie he wanted to be 3 hours long. Rocky 4 ended up being 3 hours long, and they made him cut it down, and he cut it down to an hour and a half, which it actually, at that point, is the shortest Rocky movie made. Most of them are 2 hours. This one was an hour and a half, but he was able to condense, when he took out that extra 90 minutes, he was able to condense that down because of all the montages in this movie.
Yeah, but there still was a lot of montages just at the right time.
Yep, and all that, but that's...
I mean, you can't even tell it was cut down. It was still a great movie.
Yep, you got through all the montages, you were able to get all the information that he had to cut out of the extra 90 minutes he had to take out of that movie to get it down to under 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why there's so many montages. Great movie. It's great Rocky. I believe it's single-handedly the best one.
Yep, I think both of us agree that it was a great movie out of all 6 of them.
Yep.
We both liked it.
But as far as we go on here, Dad, for So Much Jeff and Iran, what do you think possibly coming up? We're going to do one of these episodes a month. You agree with that? Is one good?
Yeah, I like that. It sure does.
One a month. We'll have a light discussion between Jeff and Iran about different things from history, mysteries, and movies. Anything in the future you thinking about discussing, Dad, for a history, mystery movie? Maybe anything you throw out there I can make notes about, something to look into? Anybody specific you like to see in movies? Anything like that?
Well, I like a lot of characters. I don't know if I can decide on one, like Steven Seagal, Van Damme, Jason Statham, Russell Crowe.
Yeah, any of those. I'd watch movies. All right, well, stay tuned. If you watch any type of those movies, Dad, just break down where you watched it on, Hulu, YouTube, TV. Have a brief discussion next episode about it. Probably do one of these, like I said, a month with So Much JENergy. I'd like to say thanks to Jen and So Much JENergy for giving us a chance to bring you So Much Jeff and Iran. Go to SoMuchJENergy.com, click on the membership tab. You can get the shirt that Ron and I are wearing right now that says So Much Jeff and Iran, and it has a picture of a UFO and pulling it up in its tractor beam. Dad, what's pulling up right there in the tractor beam on the UFO?
Bigfoot.
What's over here?
And E.T.
Nope, that's a movie camera, Dad. But
it is?
Now that you say E.T., I could see that, but it's actually a UFO sucking up Bigfoot in a movie camera. These are shirts that were made to us by fogdogstore.com, FOGDAWG store.com. What are you laughing at?
That camera does look like E.T. It's got the big head.
I know. I didn't even think that till you pointed it out, but that's hilarious.
It's got the legs coming out the bottom. All he's missing is his eyes.
Oh, nice. Real quick, say that the money that, we're trying to get for So Much JENergy that, is to help Jen and myself for advertising for the So Much JENergy podcast. We'd like to advertise it on different platforms to different people and try to get more listeners to the So Much JENergy podcast. SoMuchJENergy.com. All right, Dad, for So Much Jeff and Iran, I am Jeff.
I'm Ron.
Thank you for listening. Thanks to So Much JENergy.
See you next month. Bye.